Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. Okay, slides. So today I'll be talking about Netflix in the cloud. And Netflix was the first company that decided to go completely in the cloud, completely abandon the data center, and dedicate all of its production capacity to a public cloud. So all of this started in 2008 when a data center outage created database corruption, major database corruption, which itself caused the shutdown of the deliveries of DVDs. Those are the DVDs days. And respectively, we were losing millions of dollars a day from lost revenue, but what was even worse, we had millions of unsatisfied customers. And customer satisfaction is #1 priority for us. And this was just the major event that happened at that time, but we also had ongoing smaller events, challenges with our data center deployment. So we sat down and decided to look at it in a very holistic way and figure out what can we do to improve the situation in a real way in the future. That led to the famous decision in 2009 when we announced that we'll completely abandon our data center and we'll move everything, all of the company, all of the operations to the cloud, to a public cloud. Reaction over time from people as we blogged about our decision was very interesting. People thought that this is a crazy decision and Netflix probably just were trying to do an experiment and that we didn't really believe that it will commit to it long term. By 2010, we had some small systems launched in the cloud, and respectively, the community started to understand, okay, Netflix is really going to the cloud, and Netflix will try to do it, but it will not be successful. There's too much complexity in that, you're giving away control, whatever the reasons are. It will be unsuccessful, it will be probably the biggest experiment, the most expensive experiment that the company has done, and it will be back to the data center soon. By 2011, as we started to deploy more and more of our services in the cloud, the sentiment has changed. Now people say, okay, Netflix will be able to accomplish it, it will be able to do it. And however, the reality is that it only works for Netflix. There's something special about Netflix that allows them to do it, and it's not going to work for everybody else. By 2012, of course, everybody was convinced that, okay, we should do the cloud. That sounds like the future, but we still can't figure out how to do it. And by 2013, everybody was doing it, and everybody knew how to do it. But let's roll back to the 2009 and ask the question, why did Netflix decide to go to abandon the data center and go into the cloud? In '86, Fred Brooks published a paper in which he analyzed the work that engineers do and classified it into 2 categories, which he called accidental complexity and essential complexity. Well, what accidental complexity means is that all those problems that we create, that we try to solve, but for which there are existing simple solutions. So we could instead deploy the simple solutions and solve those problems much faster. And there's essential complexity, which is the work that you need to do for your product to be successful. So that includes R&D, it includes things like usability improvements, the features that the users demand, the performance that the user demand, and so on. And he concluded that, he was working at IBM at the time, he concluded that the accidental complexity by then has been solved. Thanks to higher level languages, thanks to better engineering processes, thanks to the retirement of some of the very flaky, for example, technologies such as the punch cards, which were very unreliable at the time. However, the accidental complexity is really generational. So in our generation, the accidental complexity are the data centers. They create a lot of problems for everybody, especially for people, for developers who are trying to build products inside of them. And problems range in multiple categories. They run out of space, there's obsolete equipment, there's bad on equipment, running out of power, cooling capacity, data center moves, and all that stuff. And really, the simple truth is that it's extremely difficult to forecast in advance to figure out what will be needed in the future for the product. The hardware replacement cycle is typically about 3 to 5 years. And the speed at which the products change nowadays is such that in a year or 2 or 3, what the product is very different from what the product was at the time the planning was happening. So respectively, you end up using equipment that you've committed to that doesn't fit well with the needs of the product at the specific time. And more so, you're missing an opportunity to deploy some of the innovation that has become viable. Recent examples for that is the introduction of solid-state disks or GPUs, and that is technology that became recently available and would have not been available for planning purposes maybe 3 years ago. Another aspect that a lot of companies are missing on is that they think, okay, it's not a big deal. We'll hire 10 engineers and we'll put them to create a data center for us. Well, in reality, though, is that engineering talent is whatever you subscribe to, not being born in the quantities that we need, or not being produced by the educational system in the quantity that we need. The simple truth is that there's not enough engineers available with the skill set that you need, and there's fierce competition for them. So you may want to hire 10 engineers, but in fact, you'd hire only 5. And then you'll be building a solution which is really not enough. You don't have the engineering capacity to build it, so you'll have half-working solution, which creates a lot of complexity, pretty much what we had in 2008 and what led to the database outage. So thinking about this, you say, well, if it's so hard to hire engineers, and we have essential complexity to solve, we should use them effectively and put them all on essential complexity problems and not on the accidental complexity problems. And we need to so as we were thinking about this, we said, okay, so we understand the problems of the data center, and we would like to look at it holistically, and we'll try to find a simple solution so that we don't need to deal with it, or at least deal with it on a much smaller scale. As we were looking for options, at that time, luckily for us, the public clouds have become available. AWS in particular has started to benefit from the virtuous cycle, where as more users were joining the ecosystem, they were driving more AWS improvements, which in return drove more users to join the ecosystem, and so on it went. So we figured it's not yet really sufficient for everything that we need. We will need to contribute to the ecosystem ourselves, but it's in a good stage to where we can start using it. So the cloud gave us a number of obvious advantages. We got scalability, we got availability, we got agility, and we got efficiency. But the cloud also gave us other opportunities that were not that obvious in the beginning as we were planning it. It gave us opportunity to eliminate a lot of the process and control that existed in the past. As we launched in the cloud, our decision was to give full autonomy to the teams to manage their own capacity and manage their own deployment. And in the process, we killed inefficient processes, which goes along very well with the Netflix culture of freedom and responsibility. Most companies, as they grow from 10 to 100 to 1,000 to 10,000 employees, start introducing processes to manage the efficiency of the workforce. And they layer them one on top of the other. But the net result is that the freedom of each individual in the company effectively is reduced, because there's a lot of friction, a lot of energy going into various processes. What we tried to do instead is, as we scale up as a company, we wanted to actually find ways to increase the employee freedom rather than limit it. In fact, we found that responsible people thrive on freedom and are worthy of freedom, and this allowed us to build the engineering organization which has one of the top performances per engineer in the world at the moment. So we eliminated single points of control. We eliminated hardware planning committees. There was another category of completely unpredictable events. We would have not been able to predict these events, business events. We would not have been able to take advantage of those if we were in the data center. And I'm just picked two of them here to share with you. In the fall of 2009, PS3 was launching as a new device. As it happened, the specification did not settle down until very shortly before the launch date. So we had very little time to prepare for the launch ourselves, to deliver the content, so that we can launch with the full catalog on the day one. Thanks to the elasticity, in this case, of the cloud, we were able to scale up the farm significantly from our normal capacities and process all of the catalog in just 3 weeks. And this was the first ever launch for Netflix that was done with the full catalog. Before, just because we were always limited by data center capacity, we could only accomplish some top-tier content initially, and then we'll catch up over time. Another very completely unpredictable event was the iPad launch in 2010. The media was abuzz with, hey, Apple is doing something very secret, some very interesting device, game-changing device, but nobody knew exactly what it was. There was a lot of speculation, but nobody knew exactly what it was. So we were expecting that as the device launches, we'll figure out how to build our application on top of it if that made sense. But what happened was Apple, shortly before the launch, reached out to us and said, hey, we are building this device called iPad, which we think will be perfect for media consumption. And you're a big media company. We would love to have you as an application that launches default on iPad from day one. So we had a very, very short time to react to this. It's, of course, the spirit of Apple. They always tell you everything at the very last moment. And now that I've worked with them for a while. And just in 2 weeks, we were able to deliver all of the catalog. Again, we managed to scale up the farm, take advantage of the elasticity, and take this opportunity, business opportunity, which if we were still in the data center, this opportunity would have been completely missed. Apple would not have allowed us to launch with some very partial experience. Apple is very much about experience. So even if in the case of PS3, we could have probably worked out some solution in the data center. In the case of the iPad launch, we would have had to launch after that. So okay, maybe by now you think, oh, cloud makes sense, but what should I need to know to use the public cloud? Well, one of the essential elements of your decision should be to make sure that you are a small fish in a large pond. And why is that? Well, the reason is very simple. You would like to benefit from that virtuous cycle I mentioned earlier. You would like to benefit from all of the other participants in the ecosystem who would drive the innovation, and you would be the beneficiary of that. Of course, you would contribute your own share to it, but you don't want to end up being this large shark in a kids pool, because then all of the innovation is really coming from you, and you're not benefiting from the other players in the ecosystem. So putting it into numbers, you can think of that there are two cases that are obvious. If you have a small set of instances, maybe 1,000 machines or so, you're probably a startup, then the obvious solution is going to the public cloud. You don't even have engineers to build your own cloud anyway, so why spend effort on it? If you're on the other extreme, if you're the big gorilla like Facebook or Google, and you have millions of machines, and you have the engineering talent to do your own cloud, private cloud, then you should probably do a private cloud. That's obvious. You can leverage various advantages and customize it for your own business requirements, and at the end get something better. And there's this gray area in the middle where Netflix falls, where you can go. You actually have three options here. One is you use a public cloud, and this was the decision that Netflix did. We're still using the public cloud, regardless of the fact that we're in the gray area, and we'll continue to try to use the public cloud for as long as needed. Or you can build a private cloud if for some reason your specifics, your product is so much different from the typical features that the ecosystem provides, it makes sense to build a private cloud. Or more typically, what I've observed talking to companies is they go to the hybrid mode, where they pull out some part of the cloud infrastructure into their own private cloud. They optimize it for their specific use case. Think about Dropbox, for example, in storage. And then everything else they do in the public cloud. So they still have the capacity, the advantages of flexibility and elasticity of capacity, but have very optimized experience for the cost-essential components. In a way, Netflix is doing that as well with CDNs, content delivery networks. We were already big enough at 30% of the internet peak hours, and it wasn't effective to us to use any of the cloud resource provided in that space, so we built our own for that. So as we moved to the cloud, we gained high availability, we eliminated complexity, process, control. We found, again, something that wasn't quite expected, the agility for the development process on one hand, but even for business decisions on the other hand. And all of that was accomplished with a lot more freedom for everybody in the company. So looking back, would we do it again? Absolutely. If we're going through the same process, we'll do it again. In fact, if we were to do it today, where we know everything about the cloud, where we know what the advantages are, where we have clouds that are much more mature than they were 5 years ago, we'll not even do a data center. We'll just go straight to the cloud. And just as a concluding thought, I wanted to say that nimbleness in today's fast-paced business environment is the difference between a successful product and the one that fails. And with this, I conclude my presentation. I'll be happy to, I have a few minutes to take any questions.
I think you can take a couple of questions. And by the way, just to start with, can you give a sense of the audience of what sort of traffic you have in Netflix? Because, like,
traffic?
Yeah, like per day, per peak hour, whatever. Or just to give the perspective of the huge.
It's a good question. I can give percentages because that's what I know. So in US in peak hours, we have between 30 and 32% of the internet traffic is driven by Netflix. Wow. I don't know what the aggregate capacity of the internet is. So, yeah. But it's a lot of bytes, a lot of bits that flow from our servers to devices that users have.
Yeah, I will leave myself speechless for a while. So, please, yeah, can we? I think we have time for 2-3 questions. So,
yes.
Here there is one.
Okay. Well, I already grabbed the microphone, so sorry.
Oh, sorry. I'm
so hi, my name is Renee Tomov. I'm from Creative Shower. We do design thinking, lab things. I was very impressed, by the way, because I come from the dark side of corporate. And we had a lot of committees and procedures and processes and so on. And freedom was kind of stuck in the back. So how did you do that? How did you achieve a culture of freedom where employees were actually given this ability to express themselves rather than go to committees meetings and abide by procedures? Can you give some examples of that?
Sure. Well, this was an intentional decision that we've made when we decided to form our culture, and we intentionally wanted to give more freedom to people, both from the perspective of innovation, but also from the perspective of process or execution efficiency, I should say. How did we accomplish it? We were very careful to make sure we eliminate each and every process where we didn't think that we were gaining significantly, where assuming we put trust into people. I'll give you examples that are not engineering. For example, Netflix was the first company, I believe, that announced that there's no vacation policy. You can take as much vacation as you need, and we trust you to do it. So there's no, so this eliminated the process of tracking vacation, approvals, and all that stuff, right? It makes it extremely simple. Another example is expenses. You can expense as much as you need, as long as you're reasonable about it, and so on and so forth. So the point is that the more freedom we gave to people, the more responsible they became, because we're treating them as adults, and people start behaving as adults. Does that mean that there are no occasional violations? Yeah, there are black sheep in sometimes, and but the question was, even if as we looked into those cases, and for example, the cost, let's say that there was the cost that was higher in those cases, it's still significantly less than the cost of running a complicated process. So again, even in that case, even if you consider there's some risk, the risk-reward ratio is still in favor of the reward. And that's how we're thinking about it and approaching it. We also hire people that we believe will be responsible citizen in this ecosystem.
I had a question. Tony, thanks for coming from California to teach us some proper socialism in terms of how it works perfectly. Maybe you can share with the politicians here, and they could do it right. But we spoke 2 nights ago, and the one thing that kind of impressed me was how this company has managed to stay focused, which I think could be a fantastic lesson for any startup which is always tempted to take advantage of this and that and this and that, just seeking which is the one that's going to really catapult it to the top of the curve. Could you maybe speak of how the company resists temptations to, do what, for instance, Amazon does, because Amazon became a leader in a vertical, and then they immediately stepped to become a leader in another vertical, which is the AWS example. And probably Netflix can leverage some of its kind of side benefits it gets by driving 30% of the traffic out there. But is there a vision behind this focus? And has there been temptation, and how does that work?
So the media business is an extremely competitive field on many dimensions, especially on content. And by having a very focused execution, it allows us to structure deals that are very well optimized. And also, it allows us to build a product that's very well optimized for the specific experience, VOD in this case, and even more specifically, content that's features, which is the movies that you see in theaters, and TV series. So that's one aspect. The other aspect is, as we look strategically going forward, is how much of a runway we have with the model that we currently have. So it's easy to fall into the temptation to say, okay, so we pretty much own the US market, and why don't we do live streaming, as an example? Sports comes to mind. Well, that's good, but then we're provoking a lot more competitors to fight us, which have a lot of money, and so on and so forth, and at the end of the day, we're diluting our opportunity to pursue the same strategy in other countries. So instead of going wide in US, we decided that day might come eventually in the future, but for now, the worldwide opportunities are much more open to us. There's really not that many strong competitors worldwide. And to us, given the efficiency of the model we have, the more we launch to more countries, the more we learn from it, the faster we launch to more countries. And this gives us an advantage to move very fast and take advantage of the expansion that we'll accomplish over the next few years. Once we hit the curve of saturation, of course, we can reconsider and decide whether we want to do live streaming, sports, concerts, whatever else, news, whatever else makes sense for our audience. That's how we think about it.
All right. I think I need to cut off. Unfortunately, well, let's go for another question. That's on me. That's a bonus.
Thank you. Now that Netflix is coming to Bulgaria, how will this change the Bulgarian movie market?
I don't know if Netflix is coming to Bulgaria. So I don't know how it will change the...
Good opportunity for
Yeah.
you. Now you can say to everybody, Netflix is coming to Bulgaria.
How it usually changes local markets?
How it changes local markets. So obviously in many markets we have local competitors, and it all drives. So one way of changing the local market, the impact on the local market, is that the cost of content is higher, which is good for content producers, which also entices producers to create better content. This doesn't impact the end user, by the way, in terms of immediate cost. The other aspect is the countries where we launched are observing reduction of pirated content distribution. So that's another kind of positive effect in the ecosystem, and it's probably the most significant one that would be observed in many countries where pirating content is high. For example, we've launched to a number of, or pretty much all countries in Latin America, and there's a reduction in the piracy there, thanks to the ease of use and quality and instant availability of the content that Netflix provides, relative to trying to expend. There's a significant effort to get to pirated content, which creates inconveniences for users. And lower cost, I should say. So we're doing all of this at a very low cost, so it's not breaking the bank for people.
Fantastic. So please give a big round of applause to Tony.
And I'll be happy. I'll be walking in the hallway. I'll be happy to answer any questions if you guys have.
Thank you, because here in Bulgaria and the region we have great engineering talent, but like building an amazing organization, the one that you built, is like we need know-how as the one you've just shared. So
thank you.
Hope you come more often.